Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the new hours of the Irv Homer Show. We'll be broadcasting live now from 8 to 9, rather. And I think this will be about the time for the biggest viewing and listening audience of the Irv Homer Show. It is Monday, January the 5th, 2009. It is the first full week of the new year, 2009. And we hope to generate some real interest on the Irv Homer Show that is dedicated to presenting a different point of view on the issues that are confronting us today. Once again, we are broadcasting from irvhomer.com. My website for you to check out that constantly changes is www.irvhomer.com, and you can email me at evilerv@irvhomer.com. This program is brought to you courtesy of the technical skills of RGH Computer Services for all your computer problems. Well skilled in setting up this type of format in your place of business, in your office. If you want to do your own show, please feel free to give them a call at 215-322-8685. 215-322-8685. And once again, let me remind you that we do have a chat room that you can jump on board with. And you can also use our live telephone here in the studio. That number is 215-253-8877. 215-253-8877. There are many issues that I'd like to cover this morning, wherever you're picking up the Irv Homer Show, and a different point of view that has not been brought up on any of the programs, but questions that I'm sure bother you if you take a look and see what the hell is going on. Let me just start by introducing some news that hit the media that I find extremely interesting. There are two issues that are just commentary, and that is in a small town in Germany where they are rehabbing some houses and doing some digging and probing. They've discovered 4 World War II unexploded bombs, determined that those bombs were dropped during World War II by the British Air Force. And all throughout Europe, they constantly run into this situation. And it is something that we here in America don't have to worry about. Although when they do some excavating in areas in which there were military bases and there were companies that produced weapons of mass destruction, namely nerve gas and other type of debilitating chemical warfare, including Agent Orange that was used during Vietnam. Once in a while they hit one of these things because they were buried and hidden and there was no EPA or Environmental Protection Agency to concern themselves as to whether or not they were paying attention to anything other than just making money. Another thing that has fallen from the radar screen is the big push. If you remember, Princess Diane, prior to her unfortunate death, was concerned about millions of landmines that have been placed all through Asia. We in the United States, when we placed our landmines during the Vietnam War, laid out a pattern of where they were. And we have records as to where those mines were, and we did our best to remove those landmines so that innocent farmers and people in the construction business didn't hit those landmines. Unfortunately, the enemy of Cambodia and Indonesia, Vietnam, placed those landmines indiscriminately throughout Asia, and the statistics that escape me, but I have in my briefcase, of the thousands of children whose legs and arms have been blown off as a result of landmines being placed all throughout Asia, some in Europe. And these are the side effects, the collateral damage from war. We very seldom discuss that because we figure war is a glorious venture in man's inability to politically solve a problem. But it is a reality, and it costs children, farmers, animals, their lives, and it runs into the thousands around the world. I found that interesting reviewing the past history of man's inhumanity to man. One of the other things that I found interesting was a revelation that sugar in food today, candy, soda, etc., does not change the habits of young children. It does not cause ADD and DHS and PDQ and CIO. However, the possibility exists that it could exacerbate an existing problem, namely diabetes in young children or children who may be prone to diabetes. But they have done exhaustive studies and have determined that sweet sugar does not cause behavioral problems in children. And I remember many years ago, Dr. Feingold, who had a Feingold diet in which he claimed that the tremendous amount of soft drinks that are consumed by children today, or in those days, the direct result was behavior problems. And so he established and wrote 2 books on creating what is known as the Feingold diet. I believe that there was evidence at the time that it did cause behavioral problems. Whether it was the direct result of autism today, we don't know. But these things are not to be scoffed at or looked at frivolously, but one size does not fit all. And although these things are done by experts, and these statements and studies are done by experts, I think it's incumbent upon us as parents and grandparents to look into the results of some of the studies that are being conducted today to find out whether or not your individual child should be tested as to whether or not an exorbitant amount of sugar in candy and sodas causes some type of behavioral problem in children. The big story this weekend is something that I find extremely interesting, and a question that I posed on my radio program today on WBCB 1490 AM in Levittown, Pennsylvania, that serves Levittown, Bucks, Burlington, and Mercer County, New Jersey. And that is the tragic death of a very popular movie star by the name of John Travolta. His son, 16 years of age, was found dead in the Bahamas, being monitored by 2 nannies, 2 caretakers. From the news reports that I have been aware of, the young man also suffered from grand mal epilepsy. There is petit mal and there's grand mal. The grand mal is a rather extreme case of epilepsy. And the young man was found dead. What is unique about the story is that John Travolta, along with Tom Cruise, are practicing Scientologists and are followers of the late L. Ron Hubbard. If you're not familiar with Scientology, it is the study of Dianetics. And L. Ron Hubbard's whole philosophy was that most of the problems that we as adults have are a direct result of our lifestyle, our thought process, and our relationship with our fellow man, and a certain amount of genetics in the particular culture, family, religion, geographical place of birth. And there are some cultural disadvantages where a certain sect of Hebrews have Tay-Sachs disease, African Americans have sickle cell anemia, and various cultures and religions and faiths have an endemic disorder. L. Ron Hubbard, in his teaching of Dianetics and Scientology, believed that if there is a chemical imbalance in the human body, it can be corrected with other chemicals. That is what we believe. L. Ron Hubbard dismissed that. And if you saw the interview with Tom Cruise and Matt Lauer, when Tom Cruise said psychiatrists and psychologists are frauds, and that using medicine to correct or heal depression and other type of mental disorders is just masking one chemical imbalance with another, the Scientologists believe there is no such chemical imbalance. They feel that there's never been a study that has any merit that there is a chemical imbalance in the brain that causes depression, anxiety. And if you read the history of Dianetics, as I have done because of a personal contact with Scientologists, a member of my wife's family, in fact, is a practicing Scientologist, there is a certain amount of merit to the teachings of L. Ron Hubbard. The problem that I see and that I discovered in Scientology is the method of recruiting. It is not known that Scientologists use the conversion technique of Islam or Christianity. They recruit by a series of levels, and I don't know whether they refer to it as plateaus or not. But a niece of mine has spent $55,000 in moving up the ladders of Scientology to a point where when you are proficient in the knowledge of Scientology, you become a recruiter. They are a well-organized religion or cult. They are well funded by people like John Travolta and Tom Cruise with unlimited financial assets to challenge criticism of Scientology by going into court. They have been very successful over the years in challenging the Internal Revenue Service, where the government claims that Scientology is not a religion and not entitled to a tax-exempt status like, quote, the organized religions are. And for all the years that I've been familiar with Scientology and religions, I have also questioned at length on major market radio, major market television, and now on the radio station that I'm on, for someone to explain the difference to me between a cult and a religion. When does a cult become a religion? Are all religions cults that we accept and move into the mainstream? Must you believe in God to be a religion? Or can you be a member of a cult and doesn't question God, but accepts the omnipotence of God, but claim that most of the problems that we as human beings have can be resolved by learning the technique of Dianetics or Scientology? That the biggest correction that can be made to a human being's failings must be done from within and not blame this omnipotent God that we pray to for some kind of relief, some type of God save me, some type of I pray to God. That God is used as the last resort when you yourself have studied Dianetics and studied Scientology and have found that there is still a void in the ability of you to correct your own condition, and so you then call upon God. But you must go through the stages of Scientology. Now, you will not hear, ladies and gentlemen, you will not hear in major market periodicals, newspapers, magazines, radio talk show hosts questioning the validity of Scientology. You will hear or read about Scientology, but very few will challenge the Scientologists. They will have you in court so fast. If you are a commercial broadcaster, if you criticize, condemn, analyze the whole concept of L. Ron Hubbard. And who is to determine what is a cult and what is a religion? It is one of the reasons that I am opposed vehemently to granting religions a tax-exempt status. The reason being that the government at that point identifies your faith as a religion. And the separation clause of the Constitution of the United States prevents the government from recognizing any religion, imposing its will, or granting it special privileges. So it is going to be interesting how long the concept of Scientology will be on the front page of the newspapers and on the talk show circuits or television when we realize that the mainstream media and the bloviators will stay away from it. I've had personal experience with them. I was invited to a dinner at a penthouse in Philadelphia many years ago with a friend of mine. We were graciously accepted into the penthouse, had a delightful dinner, engaged in some delightful conversation. And it's interesting that the whole concept of Scientology, as we were on the elevator leaving the dinner, that we were being propagandized. And so it was very interesting. But no one in the general public or the listening audience of the Irv Homer shows over the years has ever been able to identify to me the difference between a cult and a religion. So I am waiting patiently for the next few days or weeks to see whether or not there will be a full investigation by the Obama administration into the validity of the practice of Scientology. There are countries where Scientology is outlawed and banned. And it is unbelievable. Our chat room is available, and let's go to it. Hi, Irv, Laura from Horsham. I believe that Scientology is a cult. I had a personal experience with being recruited, and it was pure brainwashing. I got out of there as soon as I could. Well, Laura, I appreciate your question, your comment on the chat room. However, is not most religions, with all due respect, is not religion brainwashing? Establishing the validity of a religion based strictly on faith. So this is going to be an interesting situation that exists right now as to whether or not it will see the light of day. To our next question or comment on the chat room. Irv, we are being sued for the use of depleted uranium weapons in Bosnia by the British government, whose troops were exposed. We are accused of using them in Iraq, not only poisoning our troops, but the Iraq people, and they are claiming the use of DU weapons are being used in Gaza. Will we be sued throughout the world for the DU weapons used since we developed them? Yes, the depleted uranium has been used on the tips of Desert Storm 1. The question is whether or not it is considered to be chemical warfare. The case of Vietnam and Agent Orange, in which I was also involved in. For some reason or other, I guess I had a big nose because I stuck it in so many areas. But Agent Orange was a defoilant that was produced by 7 chemical companies in the United States who was responsible for using defoilants to clean railroad sidings and destroy the vegetation along railroad sidings and for clearing certain areas. When the United States government went to the 7 chemical companies, 3M, DuPont, etc., they said, we want you to make a defoilant that will destroy the vegetation of Vietnam so that the Viet Cong couldn't hide in the vegetation there. And so we sprayed Agent Orange all over Vietnam, poisoning the water, poisoning and destroying the foliage, and contaminating our own troops. That lawsuit is still pending in the United Nations as to whether or not the United States used chemical warfare during the Vietnam War. Now, these are not stories, ladies and gentlemen, or information that is used to condemn or criticize the United States. But it is factual, and I think the public should be made aware of it. If the public officials of all countries were made aware of the fact that depleted uranium, Agent Orange, chemical-based defoilants create untold hazards, cancer, chloracne, birth defects in children, birth defects in human and animals, 2-headed frogs, you've seen them, 2-headed cows, all type of birth defects. Whether they've been traced directly or indirectly to these things, I don't know, but the possibility exists. And we, of a human race, if we are to survive, should be very careful about the type of weapons we use. The situation that exists right now between the possibility of Al Franken being a senator from the state of Minnesota, or the possibility of Roland Burris, who claims he is the senator appointed by Blagojevich of Illinois, is an interesting study as I see it. If the people who make the laws in our country, who govern us, senators, congressmen, attorney generals, CIA heads, if they don't know what the hell the law is, ladies and gentlemen, how in the hell are we supposed to know what the law is as citizens of this great country? I pose that question again. Do we have fair elections in this country where one senator claims that the other senator didn't get enough votes? Did Al Franken get enough votes? Let's have a recount. Well, let's have another recount. Well, let's have another recount. Will Roland Burris be seated tomorrow in the Senate? Will he pass the Senate caucus? It's not whether or not the Senate will accept him. He must pass the Senate caucus tomorrow. He is prepared to go into federal court to retain the seat in which he was legally appointed to by Blagojevich, who is still the governor of the state of Illinois. He hasn't been removed yet. And so as these legalities break loose in our country, ladies and gentlemen, I have no idea what the hell laws I should adhere to. And I don't think you do either. And if we have enough money to hire the biggest lawyers or law firms in the country, we can just about stop anything or fight anything that we may feel is illegal. And we must come up with clear, definitive laws in this country so that we, the general public, the doofuses, the boobus Americans, must know what the law is so we can live by it and adhere to the law. George Herbert Walker Bush, President 41, the father of Jeb Bush and George W. Bush. I don't know whether he was kidding or not, but said that it would be nice, and he supports Jeb Bush to run for President of the United States. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. There's no law that says 3 members of one family can't be the President of the United States. There's no law that says Carolyn Kennedy can't replace Hillary Clinton as a senator from New York. There is no law that says that Frank Rizzo can't be a councilman because his father was the mayor. Or that Wilson Good Jr. in Philadelphia can be the city council member of Philadelphia City Council. And it goes on and on and on and on. We're getting to be like the royal houses of Europe, where if the name is right and the money's available and the recognition is known, we have a rule of divine right. You come out of the right womb in America and you become the president or a senator or a congressman or an appointed representative of the cabinet. Like I said, it's perfectly legal. But it is certainly questionable, in my opinion, that we have some great talent in America, brilliant minds that could do a much better job in the international scene than some of the proposed names of Bush and Clinton, etc., etc., the Bidens. I don't know where it's going to end up. And I don't know whether there could be anything legally done about it. But we talk about monopolies in business. We've ended up with a monopoly of politics. Name identification, family heritage seems to be the background of the rule of law to govern in the United States. Al Gore. Bill Clinton was a phenomenon. But Bill Clinton also is a lawyer, and so we have 2 things that I find objectionable. One is there are too many lawyers in the administrative and executive branch of government. In my opinion, lawyers belong in the judiciary. They don't belong in the executive or the representative part of government. So we have strayed a long way from the concept of this country developed by the founding fathers. I know it may be minutiae, it may be something that doesn't cross your mind. But as an observer for many, many years and a broadcaster that goes this way when the rest of the world goes that way and brings these questions to the forefront, I get no answers. And so I will pose on a 100,000 watt radio station, maybe heard around the world. What is the difference between a cult and a religion? And who makes that identification? Was the Reverend Moon a religion? Was Jim Jones a religion? Was Faye and Tammy Baker a religion? Jimmy Swaggart, is that a religion? Robert Schuller, is that a religion? Rick Warren, is that a religion? Who are these people who claim a religious appointee by God to direct not only the religious philosophy of their followers, but to pose as a threat to the political system of the United States? I know I probably am talking to myself, but in speaking to people who are thinkers, and I receive tons of email from people who say that, Irv, you're right, I never thought of it. When I do think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Larry King last night had Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard law professor, who is considered to be one of the bright spots in the legal profession in America, who I have interviewed twice in my broadcast career, found him to be so, with the exception of some questions that I posed to him, as I'm posing tonight, and he never fully answered them. He answered them with legalese, which I don't understand. I understand plain language like I speak to you. And the debate that he had last night, of course, was what is going on in the Middle East. And so looking at the situation in the Middle East and the destruction of these tunnels, ladies and gentlemen, from Egypt into the Gaza, that it's only a strip of sand on the eastern end of the Mediterranean. And the complaint of Hamas, which is the governing organism in Gaza, through these tunnels, Iran, Syria, have been shipping arms, ammunition, rocket launchers, IEDs, and all type of weaponry through these tunnels. Some of these tunnels large enough to put tractor trailers in. These are big tunnels, ladies and gentlemen. And yet, Hamas is complaining that Israel has shut off the supply of food and medical supplies by closing the border. Well, now, in my simple mind and thought process, folks, it would seem to me that if you can move weapons through those tunnels, you could move food through those tunnels, and you could move medical supplies through those tunnels, in addition to moving weapons. No one ever mentioned it. Oh, they'll debate the issue as to whether or not the Palestinians are suffering and whether or not Jordan is really Palestine. But let's talk about tunnels, of which the Israelis have no idea how many tunnels there are going into Gaza to supply them with the weapons that they're using against the Israeli invading force. Why don't they move food and medical supplies through there? Kind of boggles my mind. I don't know about you, but I think that's a question worth asking of Hamas, Hezbollah, Fatah, and the Palestine Liberation Organization. To our chat room, Wikipedia defines religion as follows. Religion is a set of stories, symbols, beliefs, and practices, often with a supernatural quality, that give meaning to the practitioner's experience of life through reference to an ultimate power or reality. It may be expressed through prayer, ritual, or meditation. Well, that is Wikipedia's definition. And I don't know where they get their definition from, but I think if you study Dianetics, the power of reality, the prayer, the ritual, the meditation, the self-evaluation of one's ability to cope with life, rather than depending on a set of stories, symbols, beliefs, and practices, who may reject a supernatural quality. These are all based on faith. Does that mean that if you don't believe in the supernatural, you can't believe in religion? And so the learned heads to our chat room in Wikipedia says basically, would you rather depend on the supernatural to improve your life, solve your problems, or do you think it would be more practical to do a self-examination and correct the problems that you have yourself, which would be the primary source of correction? The charter of, getting back to the Middle East, the charter of the four leading Palestinian governments states without qualification, without reservation, that Israel must be destroyed and the land be taken away from them. That is in their charter. As we Americans, I in particular with many other, those of libertarian belief or constitutional belief, believe that the Constitution of the United States is one of the most brilliant documents ever conceived for free men to live under. It guarantees rights to people that we don't like. It guarantees that I'm going to hear things and you're going to hear things that we don't want to hear. But nowhere does it call for the destruction of another religion or ethnic or cultural group of people. The fact that the words were placed in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the fact that man doesn't follow them because we would rather deal with our prejudices, our bigotry, and our biases, doesn't mean that the Constitution is not valid. If you read many of the scriptures of the Old Testament and the New Testament, there's some pretty brutal stuff in there. As when you read the Quran and read the writings of Hammurabi, and Hammurabi is basically the law of Sharia in which Islam was founded, it is a pretty vicious stuff in there, as is in the Old and the New Testament. If the left hand offends you, cut it off. If the eye offends you, pluck it out. Which means you're going to have a bunch of right-eyed blind people running around the earth if you follow the little translation. But you know that you've been told, well, that isn't what it means, Irving. And so you see the orthodoxy of many religions. Study and study and study and study and study and study and question. What did they mean 5,000 years ago when the Hebrew religion was conceived? And if it were not for the Hebrew religion, ladies and gentlemen, you wouldn't believe in a one God. The Hebrew religion, over 5,000 years ago, conceived the idea that there is one creator. And all religions, whether it's Islam or Christianity, have taken the concept of a one God and used it today. But you will see learned men studying and studying and studying and studying. And don't be offended when your religion or my religion and the teachings of those religions, the literal translation of those religions, are mentioned. If in the book it says that gays man with man, woman with woman is an abomination, you can't hold the fundamentalist minister, priest, rabbi responsible if he or she is a firm believer in the literal translation of the Holy Book. And the problem comes in when you realize that the Constitution of the United States guarantees all people equal rights. But a lot of folks don't want to deal with the real issue. Don't want to deal with it. And so when an Irv Homer gets on the air and brings these questions up, he gets no answer. This program goes around the world. I've been on the air 40 minutes. I posed the question again. Not what Wikipedia says, not what Funk and Wagnall's dictionary says. I want to know from you, with your own thought, to get the fuzzballs out of your head and tell me if Scientology is a cult or a religion, and are the things that you follow a cult or a religion. I am not saying that cultists are evil. I'm not saying that people who believe in religion are evil. I'm trying to figure out who knows. To the telephone, our caller on the line. Good evening, good afternoon, how are you?
Hi, Irv. Well, the reason you're not getting a lot of calls is because we thought you were going to be on at 4 o'clock.
Well, you're here. But my regular radio program that I've been doing for about 5 weeks now, I got the same response, and they know that I'm on every day at 1 o'clock. I will not get a response from folks who have to think for themselves as to whether or not they follow a cult or a religion.
Well, first of all, the reason you asked the question, number one, is a result of your religious upbringing, also mine. See, the Jewish tradition is not just to believe; it's to question, to ask questions, and have dialogue, and to really be unsure as to what the correct answer is to something. And if you study with a rabbi who's a teacher, not a priest, not a preacher, if you study with a rabbi, especially an Orthodox rabbi, and you ask a question, you're going to get an answer to that question with another question. So you are revealing your Jewish roots. That's number one. And whether Scientology is a cult or a religion, I think you answered that question already. It depends on who has the biggest, most expensive lawyer in the United States of America, and the court will decide, maybe the judge will be on, depending which side the lawyer with the most amount of money is on, whether it's approved religion or a cult. I'd like to talk about the Middle East for a minute.
Certainly.
The situation over there. Okay. Because I expected you on at 4 o'clock this afternoon. I was at my computer.
I apologize.
And you weren't on. And so I put Air America on, which I don't normally get. I normally get on my AM stations, Rush Limbaugh, Michael Medved, those people.
Yeah.
And I had Ron Kuby on.
Right.
He was on this afternoon at round 4 when I was at my computer. This guy blew my mind away, Irv.
Ron is a brilliant attorney, a well-qualified, respectable leftist.
Well, and he said, not to call him not to think he's a self-hating Jew.
Right.
Well, after listening to him, I don't think he's brilliant. I don't know I don't care what religion he is. He said you think he's intelligent. Maybe he's promoted that he's intelligent. He said so many stupid things. I listened for about 10 minutes because I was busy doing my invoices at that time for my little business. And he said so many stupid things in the period of 10 minutes.
Give me a for instance.
Well, Israel was founded in 1948. No, Israel was not founded in 1948. 1948, Israel declared its independence from Britain the same as we did in 1773, I think is the actual date.
In 1948, Israel was created by the United Nations and given legal status as a country.
Actually, the United Nations recognized Israel as an independent nation.
Right.
But Israel fought against Britain in order to get their independence from Britain. Britain controlled the territory at that time. Then, and this is something that you would know about, he complained about this brilliant Ron Kuby that I never heard before.
You never heard of Ron Kuby before?
No.
Oh my goodness.
I have to work for a living. So
I understand, but Ron has been rather outspoken over the years.
Well, see, it's a good thing you weren't on today. Now I got something new today, I guess.
Right.
He said that they blew up. Apparently, the Israelis blew up some Hamas leader's home, where they asked or told this Hamas person, leadership of Hamas, that they were going to blow it up, and they gave him they suggested that he leave, or at least get his wife and children out, and he decided not to. And they went ahead and blew it up. And Ron Kuby's complaint was, or criticism, was that they used a 200-pound bomb, and they could have used a smaller bomb. Well, if you've been on the front lines in a war, well, I know you were up in an airplane.
I think Ron was drinking funny water before he made that statement.
No, he was. This is the way he was talking throughout the entire time I listened to him. I think one stupid thing after another.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine being ready to drop a bomb and you say, well, now, wait a minute, that bomb's too big. Could you get me the 2-pound bomb instead? I mean, this is like really stupid things that he said, and this is a well-respected, intelligent attorney you're telling me?
Well, I said he's I said he's a brilliant attorney. I didn't say he was a brilliant war strategist.
Well, he's not a brilliant anything. Within 10 minutes, he said 3 or 4 things that were totally ridiculous.
Let me throw a name at you. Do you remember the name William Kunstler?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, Bill Kunstler was one of the leading attorneys during the civil rights movement.
Okay.
He was vehemently opposed to Joseph McCarthy, vehemently opposed to the House Un-American Activities Committee, vehemently opposed to anything that infringed on the freedom of people who did not think, the way, quote, you're supposed to think. And Ron Kuby was his associate. Bill Kunstler taught Ron Kuby how to be a political and legal activist. Now, as I said, Ron Kuby was never, in my opinion, a military strategist. And, in fact, Ron Kuby is the school of thought that is opposed to Zionism, claiming that as many Orthodox Jews do, that Zionism is in the heart and not a geographical location on planet Earth. And he adheres to that, but as I said, he's not a religious strategist. And to correct you, the land of Israel, believe it or not, was founded over 5,000 years ago when God allegedly said to Moses, this is your land, and bear and be fruitful. So Israel was there long before the Palestinians ever. The Jews were getting heartburn while the Palestinians were still learning how to ride a camel.
Well, that's true, Irv. But what they were saying on this program this afternoon. Well, because somebody called up and said that everybody should move out and except the indigenous people. And he did make one intelligent statement. He said, well, how far are we going to go back to decide on what the indigenous people are? So we're going back to 48 or 38 or something like that.
48.
But Zionism was always he can think that Zionism is a movement in your head or your heart.
Well, now let's take a look at the actual.
Wait a second. Can I say?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, being I'm your favorite caller, so gee, that's a shock to me because the land that the Israelis live on now was purchased from the Arabs. That was not in the Arabs' heads or minds or hearts. That was money that they got for the land.
The Jewish children, I remember as a child, donating money to the Jewish National Fund, the JNF, to plant trees in the desert, make it flourish, and to purchase the land from many Arabs. There's no question about it. That is a matter of fact. The fact is, if you want to go back, which Ron Kuby I'm sure knows about, but conveniently forgot to mention, is that as a result of World War I, when the British were given gunpowder and explosives, Lord Balfour, under the Balfour Declaration, declared that if World War I were successful, won by the British and the Americans, that they would give that area to create a Jewish homeland, and all you have to do is read the Balfour Declaration, which Britain created from creating a nation of Israel that was promised to the Jews as a result of their cooperation during World War I. The other thing that people forget is that the Islamic countries in the Middle East were allies of Adolf Hitler, that Yasser Arafat was the nephew of the Grand Mufti of Arabia, an ally of Adolf Hitler, and was not a friend of America. And that hatred is still there. And yet I don't know why, maybe because of the oil interests that we have in the Middle East, or the rich and powerful that control our communications corporations are afraid to mention it, but facts are facts, and they're not discussing it. Even Kuby and Dershowitz don't discuss the fact that the Balfour Declaration, Britain cheated the Jews out of land that they promised them going back to World War I.
That is correct, and that is why you need to continue broadcasting, as I told you last week in an email. You see, self-education, like you and I have, by actually reading books, for instance, I read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, cover to cover. People don't do that anymore today. They get 5 minutes of cable news, and they think they're educated. But the other problem is, or we used to call it the dumbing down of America. I think we should now call it America dumbed down. See, self-education, like you have, and like I have a little bit of, is not a value anymore in this society. What is a value today is a piece of paper granted by an institution, a BS, a BA, an MS, a PhD, and these institutions decide that the students should read a particular 2 books for each course each semester, and at the end of 4 years they get a piece of paper declaring them smart. That's what's happened to citizens of the United States today. They have degrees from degree-granting institutions instead of education.
Well, I think the other thing is that we have an informed public, but we don't have an educated public. And the people that are on the media today, both on the left and the right, with Air America and with the Rush Limbaugh addicts, deal with sound bites instead of factual information. They don't question anything. They're not permitted to question anything on these programs. You're not permitted in any way, shape, or form to challenge these people on the air today, because they will tell you in short shrift, we only have a minute and I have to go to a hard break. So,
right, exactly.
So we have misinformation, disinformation on the air, the lack of education of the public, and unfortunately, this seems to be the way history is now being written.
History is written by the victors.
Well, of course, history is written by the victors, but the losers have a right to speak out and point out the difference. I recall a friend of mine who was on the American Indian Commission to the Department of Interior who resented Columbus Day.
Correct.
And naturally, as a kid, I grew up, Columbus discovered America, and they found people. And he said, you know, the problem with Columbus was he found people that weren't lost. We weren't lost. We were here. He was lost. And so we take history and convolute it and say that Columbus was a genius and found America and found that they weren't lost. They were here all the time. He was an intervener looking for India and found North America.
Well, but exactly, Irv. But see, that's where your Jewish upbringing is, because you question and things that don't make sense. I remember even in. I don't want to monopolize your time if you have.
Well, that's all right. I don't mind. There's no 2-minute time limit on this program. If there's another,
that's why we need the Irv Homer show.
If there's another call, we'll let you know.
In first grade, when I was being taught Columbus discovered America, and I saw these people with headbands and feathers, I'm going like, I was 6 years old. I'm going like, what do they mean he discovered America? There's people here. Who are these people? So there are some people that question, and we're glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you permit a format where I, at least, if nobody else wants to call you, I want to call you and talk to you, Irv.
I appreciate it any time at all.
I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the ability to be able to express a free-thinking opinion on this program. Thank you so much, Irv.
Thank you. There is no corporate control of the communications media on the Irv Homer Show. We have about 4 minutes to go. Our chat room is open. You can get on the chat room and answer in your own way. I don't want you looking up in a dictionary. I don't want you looking up on the computer. I want you in your own mind to tell me if your religion is a cult, or is Scientology a cult, or whether or not you actually think of things, ladies and gentlemen, or do you just accept sometimes what is written and what is spoken? I remember someone saying to me, well, Irv, I read that in a book. And I said, well, it happens to be a lie. Well, why would they print it? Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that the printed word is only the spoken word that's a lie put in print. And critical thinking today, unfortunately, is a dying art. You will not hear critical thinkers on the air. You will not hear investigative reporters that go back and look at the situation. You will not go back. They were speaking today, or reading an article in the New York Times today about the history of the Bush dynasty during the last 8 years, and conveniently spoke about the victory that George Bush had in stopping terrorism, etc. So they never mentioned the name of a football player by the name of Tillman. Remember the name Tillman, folks? Remember the lies and the deception that the Bush administration put forth, and saying that he was killed by enemy fire, when the family of this brave soldier, a professional football player who gave up his football career where he could have made millions, went into the military and was killed by friendly fire, which means we Americans killed Mr. Tillman. Rumsfeld lied about it, Cheney lied about it, Bush lied about it, Limbaugh lied about it, Medved lied about it, the entire right-wing cabal on talk radio lied about it. It was necessary for the Tillman family to go to court to find out how he got killed, and finally they confessed that he got killed by our own troops through poor leadership in Iraq. There are certain cliches that I grew up with that stick in my mind. Whether we win the war, whether we lose a war, the first victim of any war, ladies and gentlemen, is the truth. Remember that. Governments will lie, cheat, steal, deceive, give out misinformation, will omit information. And I think it's incumbent upon people in America, in a free society, to question everything that is told to us. The war rally. Remember the rallies that we had led by that fake, phony fraud, Glenn Beck? We had thousands of people demonstrating support the troops. We had this cowboy singer singing all over the place. How come we don't have a support your troop rally today? Have flags flying on our cars, having yellow ribbons around the trees. It wasn't spontaneous by the American people. It was promoted by the Pentagon using the phony Glenn Beck on 600 radio stations to promote a pre-war rally. But you don't see that anymore, do you? Don't you think as a glory movement at the end of the Bush administration that we should have support the troops rally and support George Bush rallies on each and every street corner in America? No. What do we have? We have Palestinians demonstrating in the streets of America, trying to make America a theocracy to follow the tenets of the law of Sharia and Islam, instead of pro-Americans marching in unison supporting our troops. When are the American people going to learn that talk radio hosts are full of you-know-what that the bulls get rid of? You're being led by the hand, you're being led by the nose. And mark my words, on the 5th of January, this Monday, you will be led by the nose by Barack Obama, because there ain't a dime's worth of difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, a disgrace to this great country. I'm Irv Homer. Till the next time.